Perfect. Oh, we got started talking, and straight he hit exactly what I wanted to talk about, straight on the head. It's like,
oh my.
Oh, I talk
Right.
about this. I'll introduce you quickly. So I always talk about nutritional dogmatism and how we always fall into this black and white thinking, and it's either this camp or this camp. It's like, okay, so this is concept A, and this other person comes along and it's like, no, actually, I have this whole new way of doing something. It's actually concept B. It's like, okay, but what about the individual? What about them? And something I was gonna ask Jeff about. This is Jeff. He's like all into the whole exercise stuff and training. And so we're gonna actually dig into the training dogmatism, because in my opinion, people are too busy just throwing out research for the sake of trying to get their name onto papers as well. And yeah, and everyone's too busy arguing what's the best exercise for this, or what's the best volume for this, what's the best amount of sets for this. Okay, but what about the individual? What about what they've done before? What about what they can recover from? And also thinking they're not living in a lab. Like, people have lives outside of the gym that impact how much they can recover from something and impact how much they can give to a session. But we were just about to dig into the whole, okay, so what's better for the glute, squats, or hip thrusts topic? And that's exactly what we were going to talk about. So let's go with this.
Just wind me up and let me go.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, if we want to get into some of the deeper why or background on, on things, we can also do that. But broadly speaking, there are a lot of layers to dogma and bias and how these things kind of creep into the space. And I think social media, for all of its good, has also helped to magnify or amplify these things. And one of the prime examples is this, people call it a debate. I don't think it deserves credit as a debate, because I'm kind of a purist there, but they call it a debate between, among other things, hip thrusts and squats. Those are often the two biggest kind of camps that people end up in. I'm team squat, I'm team hip thrust, or sometimes I'm team deadlift, depending on how I'm executing them or whatever. And that's kind of my point too, is that you can always kind of insert another exercise or insert another thing and make a rationale for it within reason. People want to argue about whether this thing is better or that thing is better, and they're holding up a piece of paper, waving it around. Here's my study, here's my dogmatic, absolute, evidence-based recommendation. And they use the word evidence or the phrase evidence-based like it magically improves the quality of what they're saying or what they're doing, which is a funny thing too. But yes, so people, I'm kind of rambling, people in this space are overwhelmingly preoccupied with finding what the best X is. Is it the best exercise or the best intervention, the best diet, the best whatever? What is optimal? What is ideal? They throw these words around. And inevitably, what ends up happening in the evidence-based community is that you have people who want to compare normative data or compare averages from studies as though those averages are necessarily going to be representative of a specific person you are training, which comes back to your point, Ruby, about how they don't live in the lab and they're an individual. I think if we can take a step back and look at research as a potential jumping off point that gives us maybe an educated guess that we can make, or gives us a hint of where we might want to start, great. But when we start thinking that being evidence-based means that, I've got to hold up my book of research and beat you over the head with it, and that makes me evidence-based, that means I'm sciencing properly. If we do that, we're misappropriating, misusing the science. We're kind of bastardizing the process, and there's no need for that. People need to be, I think, comfortable with living in that gray area of maybe both can be good. Maybe I don't have to pick. Maybe I don't have to choose or make a declaration. I don't always have to have an opinion about these kinds of things, which comes back to something we were talking about too before.
It's always, people want to say, okay, what should I do? Should I do squats or should I do hip thrusts? Should I do cardio or should I lift weights? Should I lift with 10 to 12, 12 to 15 rep range, or should I lift with 6 to 8, 8 to like 3 to 6 rep range? It's like, dude, what about doing a little bit of both and incorporating them all in? Because there's also the strength fatigue ratio. Like, you can't always do these big compound moves with like heavy weights. You need to also realize that to get the stimulus, maybe you need to actually chuck on some lower load, lower like fatigue kind of stimuluses.
There are so many. There's the expression, it's a tired expression, but there's so many different paths to the top of the mountain or various versions of that. You can accomplish the goal. I don't know if your bottle's actually bigger than mine or if it's just that you're tiny. But yes, hydration is important. Oh, another thing's happening here.
I'm writing something down for another topic later.
Oh, great, cool. But there are so many different ways to give a stimulus to a system, whether you're talking about to a muscle or to a metabolic pathway or to another tissue, or maybe to give a neural stimulus to train the nervous system to do something. Your stimulus can look a lot of different ways. And even if you're just talking about making a muscle grow, let's say we're going to fall into that kind of so hot topic area of let's make our ass look better. Okay, there are a lot of different ways. The glute max, if that's the muscle you're obsessed with, is not going to know what choreography you're doing. It's not going to know that you are lying with your shoulders on a bench and your feet on the floor and a barbell across your pelvis and thrusting it, versus slapping a barbell across your back and doing a certain number of up downs, as I say, to be all insulting to sets and reps. All of that is choreography. It's just our arbitrary way of saying, we think the stimulus is this. We think we've stimulated it this many times or this much. And it's a very, very sloppy approximation of what the stimulus really is. That's a tangent I won't go on right now. But the glute max does not know. No muscle knows externally what's happening to the body. All it knows is that, oh, I'm contracting right now. And maybe I'm contracting hard. Maybe I'm contracting a little less hard. Maybe, oh, I'm feeling a burn, so to speak, because there's a certain accumulated metabolic load or a certain amount of acidity that's built up in the cell or in this area. Or, oh, I'm feeling a little hypoxic right now because blood flow has been occluded or whatever. It feels those things, and those can serve as a stimulus, but you can reach those points a variety of ways, which comes back to why we see some people who seem to favor lifting relatively heavy weights, depending on how we want to define that, and they seem to get good growth or get good results, and then other people who lift lighter, or other people who are somewhere in between, or people who lift a certain number of times a week versus a different number of times, or some people who just genetically maybe gravitate towards a certain kind of build without having to hardly do anything at all, and we kind of hate those people because we're jealous of them. Whatever the case may be, there are so many different ways to get to the same basic stimulus that I think, again, we're arguing about the wrong things. People, and I think I know why. At least one reason why. I think if you're a fitness professional, you have a drive to have the answers. You have a drive to know what your clients want or your audience wants, your followers want. And yes, and we can get more into that later. There's a little piece of this right now. But it feels good to have the answer. It feels good to have something to say. And it's easier to argue about what I think are fairly superficial things, lift A versus lift B, or this kind of carb versus that kind of carb for an average person, where it's like maybe majoring in the minors, than it is to live in that ambiguous, shaky, uncomfortable gray area of uncertainty, where we're just kind of going with the flow based on what the circumstances are today. So if you're the trainer, what's my client coming in with today? How are they feeling? What are they responding to? Do they have the energy that I expected them to have according to the programming I laid out for them? Or are they going to have to do something totally different? And if you are so locked in to obsessing, this exercise is better than this exercise, or this diet is better than that, I think you might be setting yourself up to be less flexible when you need to be. And you're kind of missing the forest for the trees. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's kind of my take on it.
100% agree with you. Majoring in the minors is such a big thing everywhere. Like, people are trying to nail it down to the dime. And you see people asking about questions they're not even qualified to ask about yet because they're not even nailing the fucking basics. Like,
yeah, definitely. And a thing that probably irritates a lot of people, like I have consultations I give to people sometimes, and they'll ask me a question. I'm like, all right, you're going to be annoyed, but I have to ask you about 5 questions first before we
I was
can.
just about to get into that. Like,
yeah,
oh my God.
I want to know what a person's really asking before I start answering, you know?
People think that you're attacking them. And
yeah.
Like, I put this into the group as well, because some, like, my actual client group, because they would ask questions and I wouldn't answer them. Like, I would ask them more questions to figure out what the hell they're asking in the first place and why they're asking it.
Yeah.
And you see in like the big Facebook groups, people would just put out a question without context, and people are just throwing out answers all around the sun. And it's like, okay, I don't understand this. Like, there are so many ways I can go about this question. It's like, well, I don't freaking know. What did you do yesterday? What did you do today? What did you do this morning? Like, what? Why are you asking this question?
And that line or that rabbit hole goes so deep. It's not just if a person says, you know, what is optimal for whatever, and you can go, well, what do you mean by optimal? Of course, you can do that, but it goes so much deeper. And there are certain things that even the smartest among us are making assumptions about that maybe we shouldn't be making assumptions about. Grammatically, got to make my sentence work there. And about which we are making, if you don't want to end a sentence in a preposition. Anyway, this is how my brain works. I'm sorry. We can have a separate session where we just talk about English and all the bizarre nuances therein. But you have, what was my train of thought on this?
The fact that so people just give answers without asking questions.
Yeah, and so do I even know if a person's talking about about hypertrophy? Are we talking about the same thing? We assume everybody knows what that word means, but do we really? Do we know? Yeah, okay, what's the context? Are you talking about for all people? Are you talking about for your specific client? Are you talking about a certain group of people? Like, are we talking about a certain, like, you know, elderly East Asian mothers, grandmothers, you know, who've never exercised before? Or are we talking about, you know, white college age, you know, Western European or American males who are trained? Like, you know, there are so many questions that we have to ask. And I think one of the bad habits we have in this field is of assuming we have enough information to just charge right on ahead. And this is why we end up shouting past each other. So often people are closer than they think they are, or at least they could much more easily form or develop some sort of an agreement or some kind of an understanding with each other if they would just slow down a little bit, like pump the brakes a little bit and go, okay, is this what you're asking? Before I dive forward into my rebuttal or my argument or my, you know, waving my science hammer around. Hold on, I got a femur.
No way.
Waving my science hammer around. I almost pulled my my profile pic. You know, I found this humerus. Yes, I have a humerus on hand just for that. On hand. Anatomy
talking
joke.
About the bone for those of you that aren't actually watching the video. He has like
some
bones around him.
So I'm holding up a humerus now, and now I'm holding up a femur. I have bones because I teach anatomy and stuff, and I have a session tomorrow, so I got all my stuff ready here. So yeah, I say tomorrow, it'll be later today for you, I guess. So yeah, we just, it's hard, you know, Ruby, it's hard to live in this space of being careful about what we say and being patient and being thoughtful and not rushing to make that post or rushing to put out that content or rushing to have an opinion, because everybody else seems to be doing that. And it feels like we're going to get left behind if we don't join the fray.
It's that, you know? That's the thing, like, it's like that fear of missing out. It's not just that everyone seems to be doing something. It's that everyone just wants to I didn't send it to you. I sent it to someone else. Like, sometimes someone would send me a meme and say, oh, I thought you said this. I'm like, yeah, but what's the context with that? Yeah, okay, cool. It was this thing on cardio, whether you do cardio or not. like there was one person that did 2000, they ate 2000 calories, did no extra cardio, and they still lost weight. And then someone that ate 250 calories, wait, no, 2,500 calories, did 500 calories worth of cardio and still lost weight. I'm like, yeah, cool. It's showing that cardio isn't needed to lose fat, but that doesn't cover the whole story. Like, what if your cholesterol's through the roof? What if your blood pressure's through the roof? What if your quality of living is not where it should be? And that comes to the whole thing of like, movement isn't just about exercise. Exercise isn't just about movement. Like, there is so much more to.
Well, we project our priorities. It's a selfish, narcissistic thing. It's an egotistical thing that a lot of us do. And I'm not trying to be super judgmental and be like, you're a bad person. But I think it's just, we can get caught up in assuming that other people have the same priorities we do, or have the same perspective that we do. They have maybe the same experience. And we come from that and go, oh, so to me, cardio would only be important for this reason. And so if this one thing is taken off the table, then we don't need to talk about it at all anymore, even though I could be missing some very important variables. And this is what starts a lot of the shouting matches. People don't start off going, okay, we can all agree that there are a variety of different perspectives, or there are a variety of different priorities out there. For example, I don't remember the last time I did a deadlift. Now, that is because largely of my injury history and my own priorities. That doesn't necessarily need to apply to anybody else on the planet except for me. So I'm not going to say never do deadlifts. Like, no, I got plenty of friends who do. You do them. I watch you do them in your posts all the time, like, but it's one exercise. It's one option. It's one means of doing certain things. And your priorities can be certain things for hypertrophy or certain things for strength. And you can define strength a few different ways. Could be for competition purposes. You can have this list of reasons why you might want to do a certain exercise or a certain movement.
People are so married to the exercises without actually asking themselves, okay, what exactly is my training goal? Is this exercise really benefiting me for that? And I got this a fluke, but I think the barbell back squat is the most overrated exercise. Like, the most. There are people that cannot functionally move properly in a barbell back squat to elicit any type of strength or hypertrophy effect. Like, people need to learn that it's okay to take a step back to do like split squats, or to do like a front squat if they need to do a front squat. And there are people that live in like this posture that can't actually get this off their back. So then they end up doing this and not actually like squatting properly. And it's just like,
for those who aren't watching right now, she's contorting herself like a circus performer. It's hilarious.
But that's how you see people do certain exercises, because they aren't yet qualified for it. And
hey, I'll do you one more. And this might trigger some people. I don't know. I shouldn't use that word, but for years, I didn't hardly do any back squatting. I've had chronic knee issues, whatever. And I'm not trying to say, ooh, squats are bad for your knees. I know so many people whose knees feel better because they squat, So again, they're not me. But I did martial arts for years, and I still do sometimes. But I was jumping around doing spinning hook kicks through the air and, sparring with people several times a week, and like a lot of leg stimulus that looks different. It looks different from moving a barbell around, but my legs were plenty strong just from that. And when I did go to do leg day at the gym, it was a lot of machine work. And a lot of people might look at that and like freak out and be like, how can you be functional? Well, I was like, well, get in the ring with me and we'll find out, like how functional I am.
And then it comes down to the meaning of functional. People butcherize the meaning of functional.
It's just, it's what do you need to do? What do you need to be able to do? And what stimuli are you receiving? And what capabilities are you bringing to the table today? Just like I was saying about the glutes, right? Your glute max does not know whether you're doing a hip thrust or a back squat or a deadlift or a glute extension thing on a machine or whatever. It doesn't know. It just experiences the local stimulus as it experiences it. So why wouldn't my quads get plenty strong if I'm hopping on a leg extension machine and just blasting them with that, But some people think, oh, this isn't functional, or this isn't an appropriate, it doesn't look like real life. Well, you know what? Putting a barbell across my freaking neck or across my upper shoulders or upper back also doesn't look like real life for me. So if that's your metric, you know, if that's how you evaluate whether an exercise has value, does it look like something you do in real life? I think we're kind of forgetting what exercise really is. Exercise often is this very structured, very artificial thing, and that's fine. Artificial doesn't make something bad. I mean, you know this, you can marry this to the nutrition discussion. Same thing. This chemical is natural. This chemical is not natural. It was created in a lab. But if it's chemically identical, if it's truly identical, then the body shouldn't be able to tell the difference.
It's just like that whole GMO debate. It's like
Yeah.
things are done to improve. Like way back then, they didn't have the ability. It's just like medicine. Like way back then, they didn't have the ability to improve the quality of life. Like now we have implements to help improve our quality of life. We have ways to increase our bone density just by lifting, like resistance training. That doesn't just mean weights, but for a lot of people, that's their best way to get their optimal results. Like movement isn't just exercise. Exercise isn't just movement. And it doesn't just come down to the same goals like that. Like exercise has a myriad of benefits outside of just growing muscle. Like there's like mitochondrial health, because your body needs mitochondria, as in the energy cell, because your body needs that energy to actually fuel the muscle cells. So what happens? The mitochondria has to then adapt and grow. Like and that actually is anti-aging, because the higher your ability to use oxygen, the better your capacity for life, the better your capacity for everything, because you're able to utilize your energy more to do life. And then you're just a more energetic person overall.
Yeah, maybe at some point we can all be on your level. But yeah, it's, you know, and you've highlighted something here, or we maybe have highlighted something. So many of these problems broadly speaking, in the realm of, you can say, fitness, nutrition, and broader health, as far as the misconceptions that are out there and the arguments that are happening, all this, so much of this stuff boils down to some varying aspects of bad critical thinking. You were just talking about, or we were just talking about GMOs or whatever, and not to go off on a tangent about that, but this is natural, this is not. Okay, so there's a natural or an appeal to nature fallacy going on there, you know? So there are logical fallacies that we have to be aware of, and cognitive biases that we have to be aware of, you know? Am I liking this thing because I've just always liked it? Is there like an appeal to history kind of thing going on, or appeal to tradition? Is there confirmation bias that I'm seeking out? I'm trying to grab onto, you know, information that aligns with what I already think I know, or already like, or already believe. Am I believing stuff from this person because I like this influencer more than I like this other person? So am I going to listen to this person more?
And there's a whole placebo in that.
Yeah. And, you know, am I assuming things about what this person is saying because I don't like this individual? If you know, if you and I have a very adversarial relationship, and you say something, I might be tempted to put words in your mouth, or I might be tempted to project a kind of intent onto the things that you say, even if what you're saying could be perfectly kind and considerate or perfectly accurate. I can twist it and misrepresent it. Maybe I don't even notice I'm doing it. But there are so many of these things that fuel our, you know, these endless, what I consider to be useless debates, pointless debates, arguments about, you know, again, this exercise versus that. I mean, it's fallacious to think that we have to rank them in the first place, because there is room for all of these different options. Another thing I was going to say earlier is that it may very well be, you know, we all have limited time in the day. We can't do all of the exercises. We can't try all of the diets. We can't do, and nobody's saying that nobody should be saying that we can do all of them. But if you're trying to ask all these questions about what's the exact right optimal way to do this, before you even get started, you're going to drive yourself crazy. You know, you get maybe a rough jumping off point, and then you jump off and you try it and you adjust and you figure out, maybe you're going to like this exercise more than this other exercise. And maybe it's going to fly in the face of what all the evidence-based people say. But if it's what you enjoy, and it's what's getting you out of bed, or it's getting you to the gym, or it's giving you that stimulus, and you wouldn't be there doing anything otherwise, then God bless you. More power to you. Go and keep doing it.
That's the thing. It's you need to know where your starting base is first before you ask about all these things. Like in the groups, especially, there's a lot of beginners, but people forget where they start out. People are they're so focused on where they are now that they give answers from where they are now versus where that person is. And I was listening to something the other day from someone who started their running routine. They just left their shoes at the door, and that was their first routine, putting on their shoes. And then they walked to the end of the street and they did that for a couple of days. And then they ran around the block. And before they knew it, they were running marathons. Like, you need to start with where you're at and be okay with that instead of trying to progress at the rate of everyone else. But then you said something that I really want to touch on, where you see like these people that have like a name against them, or they're really popular, and then you want to like put something out there so you can get all the likes, and then it can get shared, even though it's so like, it's just so myopic. But body sells. Like someone with a big booty on like an Insta thought with a big booty, they're trying to sell this stupid booty band workout. Like their body is selling the exercise, but is it that exercise that did it?
Oh yeah, I mean, you see this all the time on I'm intentionally not going to name any names or brands here because I'm not a call out kind of guy usually. For anybody who might hear this, who's actually witnessed a couple of my public back and forths with people, ignore those. I'm trying to be a nice guy. But yeah, you'll see these commercials that come on, you know, the late night fitness commercials, whatever, and whatever the device is, or the piece of equipment, not that that piece of equipment or whatever, or exercise program doesn't have value. I like to think that the overwhelming majority of them do, but you have to know where its limits are, you know. But they have these models who are shredded up, and you go, okay, it's probably not the case if they used this device or they did this thing to get that way. So it just kind of feeds into what you said. And again, there are people keep going, oh wait, should I use this equipment? Should I do this exercise? Do this thing? And again, there are so many different ways. Just get yourself exercising, get yourself training in what ways you can safely, and see where your progress goes. And your progress may not look like somebody else's, but you're not somebody else, you're you. And if we just focus on these fundamental ideas of just getting some kind of a stimulus to a muscle, getting some kind of stimulus to the heart or to a metabolic system, just giving the system, and I'm using the system in very broad terms here, some kind of work to do, some kind of challenge that it's not accustomed to. And we can be somewhat systematic with that, somewhat consistent with that, we should see improvements to the system. And we get in our way so often. We get in our ways, like just distracting ourselves from that basic truth.
People go for entertainment versus just getting the work done. It's like,
it's tough.
There's also the fact that your body needs to neurally adapt to the exercise before your body as a system can like adapt to the exercise. So jumping from like one program to another program, or one exercise to the next exercise on the next week, instead of sticking to the same one and trying to progress at that and get better at that, is actually holding you back. And then there's like the movement thing that I was going to say, like most people just aren't moving enough. And movement has benefits for the lymphatic system, has benefits for fascia. Like if you don't use it, you lose it. And then that's why people get stiff and then shrivel away into little weak, frail beings. Like, like movement is medicine. It is actually medicine. And you said hydration is important. Hydration is also really important for the muscles and the lymphatic system and the fascia. Like it all ties into one.
Yeah. And you know, one of the things that also I was touching on or was hinting at with the whole like exercise is not necessarily movement or vice versa, like they're not directly interchangeable, is my point, is also that sometimes you can get a lot of exercise in certain ways with no movement at all. If we're talking about weightlifting, you know, and this could be a bigger like biomechanics discussion, whatever, but you have a muscle that's just holding a position could be experiencing a substantial challenge. You know, if you're standing with a barbell on you, a bunch of weight on your back, and you go down into that squat, and then you just stop, just hold it. Nothing is changing length very much. The muscles are more or less kind of static. We're not going to talk about tissue hysteresis and all kinds of other stuff. But like generally, overall, you're not moving, not really, but you're working.
You
You
can say
feel
the
it.
same about stretching. Stretching does the
Yeah.
same thing. Luke actually said this, but
Oh,
stretching also invokes the glute for translocated to the muscle cell as well, because you're invoking tissue damage to that cell just from stretching it. If you stretch
you
it,
can, yeah, you can be in, and that's so, and it's a fun area to look into. Sometimes people jump to conclusions or they take these things too far. But yes, a stretch could potentially introduce damage. You can potentially cause some kind of disruption. Could be a good disruption. We do. You can do EMG studies and you stretch a muscle, and sometimes you can see, oh, there's more muscle activity. There seems to be more electrical activity. Whether you're talking about stimulating, a muscle spindle or what have you, or whether you're getting some kind of relaxation response that kicks in from a Golgi tendon organ, blah 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 blah. You have this neuromuscular stuff going on, and it does go to show that these systems, if you really want to understand them, can be a lot more complicated in a cool way. Like, oh, there are different ways that we can stimulate this muscle, or there are different ways we can challenge the body. And another thing, challenge. Sometimes maybe your exercise is not progressing you in terms of making that muscle bigger this week. That's okay. Maybe you just need to get, you're trying to progress because you, for whatever reason, want to be more stable controlling a thing. Or maybe there's some connective tissue. Maybe your joint is still kind of learning to accept those forces. So maybe you don't need to increase the weight anymore and the muscles are ready, but the joint hasn't caught up, or any of a million other things. And you just want to get good at something. If it challenges you in any sort of way, it could potentially have value. You just have to decide what your goals are for that exercise.
This makes me want to pull my head out so much. Like, people are always so focused on, we need to progress week to week. We need to add weight week to week. We need to add reps week to week. But what if there's a purpose of progress that isn't down to that? Like, if a body can't move functionally, maybe it's teaching a body that it's actually safe in that range of motion, which then can come down to the muscle spindle, the GTO, the whole muscle stuff he was talking about. That's what a stretch invokes. That's what lengthened ranges of motion in your training does, which is why sometimes there is tempo in your training with a pause, because you're trying to teach your body to be safe in that motion, so then it actually can move in that motion, and then your body outside of the gym can actually be more functional. Because when you're moving in day-to-day life, you aren't moving just backwards and forwards. You move in all planes of motion. If something over here happens, oh no, I just pulled my back. Like, it goes to show that you need to train your body to become more resilient in day-to-day life. That is what it is all about.
Yeah. And, there's, I guess, like if I had somebody in front of me who was just starting to exercise, one of the things I would tell them, there are so many things. I could, just talk forever, I guess, much to the chagrin of everybody else out there in the world. One of the things I would tell them is it's okay to stay in one spot for a while. It's okay. Oh, my weight's not going up. Yeah, but do you feel different this week compared to last week? Maybe you didn't technically, like on the spreadsheet, on the clipboard, in the notebook, the numbers didn't go up. That does not mean you're not improving, because improvement can happen in so many different ways. There are so many different tissues and systems and abilities that are all kind of changing at their own rates as they want to. They're all adapting at their own paces. They're not all going to be in perfect synchronicity or synchrony or whatever, insert word here. They're not going to all trend exactly together, because that's just not how life works. That's not how the body works. Things are just too complex. It's like, you have a city of 1 million people or more or whatever. And, while in general, the city may be trending in a certain way, growing at a certain rate, it doesn't mean that, like per capita income in that city is going up. It doesn't mean every single person in that city is seeing their income go up or go up at the same pace. So sometimes we need to let the body kind of sort itself out and take our time. This relates kind of to something that Alex and I ranted about on our website and also publicly about, by the way, I say Alex Viata, who's a partner in crime of mine. when we talked about progressive overload. People have this misconception that this buzzword progressive overload means keep up in the weight, bruh. And that's not what it means. You can progress things in a variety of ways. You can find all kinds of different ways to overload your body. Overload just referring to providing your body with some kind of a stimulus that it's not quite used to. It doesn't have to be a lot. It could be 1 pound more. It could be 1 rep more. It could be maybe the same number of reps, same rate, same speed, but you're going a little bit farther into the range of motion, or you're holding for a little longer in that position before you come out of it, or you're co-contracting muscles together in a different way to give yourself a new challenge. You can change so many variables. And I know that's intimidating to people, that's daunting to a lot of people, but I think it should also be reassuring, because it serves to give us opportunities. We have so many opportunities, different ways we can make progress. I know, this is a great thing. Okay. I've done martial arts for a number of years, and my first martial arts teacher was talking about getting older. He said, I've already peaked. Like I'm not going to get faster. I'm just trying to reduce how much I slow down these days. And, he's fighting with or sparring with people less than half his age, and he's trying to keep up with it. He said, but, I can still work on my knowledge, and I can still work on my coordination. I can still work on my timing. I can still work on some of these kind of physical things. And maybe my muscles will not get any stronger. Maybe I already peaked. Maybe I didn't. But the point is, there are so many different things I can work on. I should not get distracted. I shouldn't get distracted by the one thing. Oh, the number on the barbell isn't going up.
People are too busy focusing on what isn't working for them versus what is working for them. And the same goes for oh no, the scale weight didn't go down for those that are married to the friggin' scale, which I hate. But it's but you just said, because most of my girls do not weigh themselves. And just because I had this the other day, she was feeling amazing. She was sticking to everything for the first time in ages for 2 weeks. Let me tell you, 2 weeks. She steps on the scale. Oh, I was feeling so good. I was sticking to my habits. My clothes are feeling better. I'm feeling more energetic. I feel amazing. But the scale, I feel so demotivated. I'm like, dude, you just said that you feel better. You just said that you've been the most consistent than ever. You just said your clothes feel better. And you're going to let that deter you from all the things that are going well in your life. Oh yeah.
It's like the scale. If the scale were a person, it would be like, not that the scale doesn't have value, but it's like the scale's looking up at you going, are you going to believe me, or are you going to believe your lying eyes? Like challenging you to ignore all of the other evidence in front of you. Like your clothes fitting better, you're feeling better, you're moving more competently, you feel more in charge of whatever you're doing during your workouts, whether it's lifting weights or running or anything. So many other things in your life, physically and otherwise, might be doing better, but because this one little thing supposedly isn't going right, because maybe the scale weight should go up because you're putting on muscle or whatever. So many of these other things are going well. You're going to focus on this one variable because that's just how our crazy monkey brains like to do sometimes. We like to sabotage ourselves, really, to get distracted by one negative thing in a sea of positive things.
I think I hate the most.
It's unfortunate. I do it too, though. I'm guilty of it too.
We're human. That's what I was just about to say. We're all human. And the thing that I always say, and the thing that I'll keep saying, is that our old beliefs and the way we pretty much got brought up led us to react. Like, we don't see things as they are. We see them as we are. And a lot of the time, the way that we like the monkey brain, like you said, like it served us a purpose back then, and it's a hard habit to cut. Like, we might be celebrating all of our, we might want to celebrate all of our wins, but in the past, it was never appreciated. So we just come to someone for our struggles because that's when we need help. So what are we focusing on? Our struggles. What are we voicing? Our struggles. What are we writing down? Our struggles. What are we not writing down? Our wins. Because when everything's going right, we just keep going and we don't mention them and we don't celebrate them. And then people shoot on other people for being, oh, they're the posing chicks. Oh, they're like, you should be loving the fact that people are celebrating their wins. We should be bringing each other up and encouraging that sort of behavior, because we don't see enough of it. And then you wonder why there's so much complaining. Oh.
Yeah, there's a lot, you know, and again, so much of this is just the sort of logical, behavioral, psychological mess that we find ourselves in as people. And it's a lot to untangle, you know, whether you're talking about typical struggles of a person who's just trying to get in shape, or the difficulty we have finding good information, because so many influencers or so many people who have a platform probably shouldn't have one, or maybe two smart people will get into a debate, get into an argument with each other or a disagreement, and they keep shouting past each other because they're not really taking the time to slow down and understand each other. Whatever the case is, it so much of this boils down to, I think, our weird, wacky psychology.
Everyone wants to be right. Everyone wants to have the answer, but also everybody wants the answer. So it's like they complain to try and find this one answer. And that's the thing, like, it's good to have an answer, because then, oh, cool, I have the answer. I'm the guru. Everyone's going to look up to me. But there is so much nuance to everything. And I actually really want to have you talk about lazy glutes, because I know you can go down a rabbit hole about that. Lazy glute, and I guess asymmetrical. Like, if there are some people that would say they feel one side of their leg or one side of their quad more than the other, or they'll finish a day worth of training and the next day they'll be really sore on one leg or one glute, but not the other side.
This is a tough topic because, well, among other things, one, it's actually just super complicated because it involves nervous system stuff and sensation stuff. And I used to try to shy away from sensation stuff when I was like in the lab or doing anything. I was like, let me do objective measures. I don't want to deal with somebody's subjective like sense of it's on, it's off. It's like, it's weird. It's why pain science sometimes gives me headaches. It's not that it's not necessary. It's that it's just hard. So one reason is that. And the other reason that this is a difficult thing to talk about is that you have so many loud voices, so many people who have an opinion, and they'll let you know it. You'll hear it from around the world, like just shouting from a rooftop, your glute turned off because of this. Really? Did it? I don't know. Okay. I say all that as a preamble to this. I wonder if people who are listening are like, who is this guy? Maybe we should have done a proper intro earlier. Hi, I'm Jeff. I'm a nerd, and sometimes people listen to me. I don't know. But okay, so the lazy glute thing. It is true that we often have a perception that a muscle on one side doesn't seem to want to work as well as what we think is its twin on the other side. And my quick answer is I don't know. Wow, what a long-winded cop-out. No, there are times when a muscle on one side does not seem mechanically to operate the way that its counterpart on the other side of the body does. So like my left glute versus my right glute or whatever. Sometimes that's a real sensation. So it's truly not creating as much tension, or it's not, there's something mechanically different going on. And in those cases, it could simply be that it's a training thing, like a nervous system coordination thing. For whatever reason, you've just developed a habit. Could be nothing more than just a habit. I have certain postural things, like I lean more one way than another, and maybe that's a result of years of injuries, or maybe it's a result of being right-handed and playing video games. It could be, I don't know, a million different things, but I've developed habits. And if it's just a motor habit and you feel a need to change it, you probably can change it. It might take some training, might take some practice, but it doesn't have to be the end of the world. There are other times which comes down to that whole person shouting from the rooftop, oh, your glute turned off because of this. You get people who try to kind of pathologize. They try to say, oh, there's something that's wrong with you that needs fixing. And maybe it's because you're dysfunctional, or you're weak here, or you're tight here, or you're whatever. And I would just tell people that could be true, but be wary of people who are overconfident with how quickly they say that that's true. So if you walk in, hopefully this is all making sense. If you walk into to see a trainer and you notice that like, I feel a little funky, this side feels different from that side, and they immediately just start saying, oh, it's probably because, and they give you some like definite answer that, oh, it's this muscle's weak or this thing's tight, something they memorized from a certification or something they heard from Joe Blow's course over there or whatever, I would say be very, very wary of those people, because what they're showing you is not knowledge. They're showing you confidence, overconfidence masquerading as knowledge. It's cockiness and ego and insecurity in many cases deep down, and a sense of needing to compensate for that insecurity that then manifests as this false wisdom kind of thing, like, oh yeah, I know this. I will say this, as somebody who worked for a few years in a neuromuscular physiology lab, somebody who has been in the exercise science world academically for a number of years, and who's been teaching people at the undergrad and graduate level for a number of years, I don't have that kind of confidence to say, oh yeah, this muscle just turned off. So if you encounter somebody with a certification who claims that, it's not that they have knowledge that the rest of the researchers don't. It's that they just are too ignorant to know how little they know.
So it's important not to just spend like 30 minutes of your pre-exercise time doing these useless glute activations.
Probably, yeah. Like, no, let me add a caveat to this though. If you genuinely feel better, if you do a thing and it makes you feel better,
do it.
Probably keep doing it. Yeah, probably keep doing it. Assuming we have no evidence that it's causing you problems and we don't have a good reason to believe that it's going to like result in some problem down the road. And that's a value judgment that you as the exerciser or you as the trainer, like you got to figure that out. Like that's an individual thing. Assuming there's nothing like that going on, then yeah, do the thing that makes you feel better. And the why behind it probably doesn't matter that much.
Yeah, the same goes for like that goes for everything. It's like if something actually feels good for you, like if you feel better doing faster cardio, do that. It comes down to everything. And as long as you're not expending so much of your energy and time on something that it takes away from the bulk of the matter, which is why I clearly said 30 minutes. It's just that's why I said 30 minutes, because like, yes, glute activation.
Yeah, clear exaggeration there. Like it's obvious, like that's a bit much. Yeah.
Like glute activations serve a purpose for those that need to actually create that word again, sensation, the sensation of the glutes being activated during the session. Yes. But you mentioned something about the stretching thing, like, oh, this is tight. I am sick to death of people saying, oh, you just need to do this stretch. It's like, no, just because it feels tight doesn't mean you need to stretch it, because that can actually make it worse. Is it tight or is it taut? Does it need to be strengthened or does it need to be stretched? Like,
yeah, and you know, there are lots of times it's kind of a fun little experiment to do. I'm using experiment in a very informal way when I say it right now, but just, you know, have a person, oh, what muscle does that feel tight right now? Okay, well, have a second person kind of assist them, like move through a range of motion. Okay, how far can you go on this side? Okay, how far can you go on this side? Are they actually different? And in many cases, they're not. Now, one side may still feel different, and that feeling is valid. It's not to say you don't feel that, but the feeling may not necessarily be a good indicator that like, oh yeah, I'm restricted and I need to loosen this thing up. It could just be some little quirk of the nervous system. It could be, well, maybe you had an injury there and maybe it's kind of like a soreness tightness. So that's the thing that happens too. Sometimes people think they say they feel tight, but really they're just feeling some DOMs from a workout from a couple of days ago, you know, and it hurts enough that they feel like, oh, I feel a little restricted, but they actually still have the same range of motion they had before. So that's sort of a developmental thing that takes time, practicing listening to your body and practicing observing. Is this, you know, is my body lying to me right now? I don't want to say lying to me, but am I being somehow misled by some of these sensations, or are they not necessarily telling me what I initially thought they were telling me? Maybe they're still giving you a good information, but it doesn't have to be what you thought it was.
That's the thing. Everything is data, everything is information, but it out of context, that it's just this little, it's just a sentence. That sentence means nothing unless you actually zoom out and read the actual script. Like, is that sentence sentencing someone to friggin' death, or is it sentencing someone to the kitchen? I don't know why I said kitchen, but you know.
Death or kitchen. That should be the name. If you ever do an autobiography, that'll be the title. So you have this, that's a good point you make about context. You know, most of the time now, I'm not perfect about it, but I've gotten a lot better. When I'm working out, I get to a point where I go, okay, let's see what my body's doing today. And, oh, that thing hurt. I can't do that lift. Oh, well, that kind of sucks. I wanted to do this thing and I have to do something else. But it's really just a shrug. I just kind of go, all right, well, I'll pivot and do something else. And that's all the emotion I have to put into that. It does not have to be any more than that. It's just information. So, oh, okay, that position hurts today. Thanks for the info. Thanks for the memo, body. Thanks for telling me that. I'm glad you gave me that. I'm going to tuck that away, file that information away, and, you know, make use of it when it's relevant. And you don't have to treat information as being inherently like good or evil, good or bad. It doesn't have to have that kind of a value judgment attached to it until you are putting everything in the context of what you want to do, what your priorities are. Just the same way that a diet's not inherently good or evil. Does it serve your purposes? Is it, you know, is like when people say, what do you think about? And they ask me about an exercise, I'm like, I think it exists. I mean, what else do you want me to say? And they're asking me for a value judgment, but I'm refusing to give them one. You know, I'm not playing their game.
It's like, well, what do you mean? For what purpose? Is it good for your body? Is it good for your context? Like, where are you going to fit it into the workout? Like, are you going to do it at the freaking beginning? Are you going to do it at the bloody end? Because if you're going to do like a 1 rep max deadlift at the end of your workout, I would say that you're a nutcase.
Yeah. You know, I'm going to pick on him a little bit. If you never saw it, you need to see the video of Alex doing, I think he did 4 reps, could have been 5. I think it was like 4 reps though of a fairly heavy deadlift.
Is this the beers and deadlift?
What's that?
Is this the beers and deadlift?
Yes. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
And I'm like, you, sir, are a madman. But it's, you know, like sometimes that brings me actually to an important point. Sometimes people do a thing that is an exercise movement, or it is, you know, something that people use for exercise, but they're not doing it for that purpose. They might be doing it for fun, or they might be doing it to show off, or they might be doing it for any of a myriad, just ton of other reasons.
To get all the likes on Facebook and freaking.
You know, and if they know that that's why they're doing it, I guess more power to them, you know? And of course I pick on, well, and I pick on Alex also because, you know, he warms up with a deadlift that would snap my spine. So, you know, it's whatever. He's freakishly strong compared to me, especially in those kinds of lifts. So I just have to resentfully pick on him.
That's the other thing, context. Like you might see someone doing an exercise and you might want to try it, but if you try to do that, it might actually make your situation worse. Like they know why they're doing it. You don't.
Oh yeah, for sure. I've been experimenting with a lot of this lately again, or reacquainting myself with this because I had knee surgery about almost 10 months ago. I had my ACL completely reconstructed. And I'm still like, the other day was my first time doing barbell squats since my surgery, you know, and I'm like, not that they were always a huge, huge part of my workout anyway. They're just a thing I would sometimes do. But I was like, yay, I did the thing. But I'm reacquainting myself with my ability to do certain things I did and I could take for granted before the surgery. And I'm now back at a point where I can do certain things that to me are pretty mundane, but I know other people who lift way more weight than I do, like weight that I can never probably touch. But if they tried doing this thing, they might hurt themselves, like standing up and doing like a snap kick of some kind, or pivoting a certain way and doing something funky with my hip that, even though I'm kind of like out of my prime, whatever, like I can still do, and that most people can't do without a substantial amount of training, because I did that for years. We all have our own capabilities. We all have things we bring to the table, and we need to come back to reminding ourselves that we are our own gauge. We are what we measure ourselves against, or that's what we should measure ourselves against. So am I improving in my ability? Not can I do this thing that he or she does, not can I do that thing today or tomorrow or next week or next year, but can I move in some direction that improves me in some way? And then you have so many options there. You have so many choices you can make about how you want to improve. There's always something you can work on. Don't get disheartened. Don't get discouraged because you're not doing this thing that somebody else is doing and is getting a lot of likes on Instagram for doing. I long ago accepted that there's certain stuff I will never do. I just won't. My shoulder is so trashed that I may never be able to do a clean looking muscle up. Okay, fine. I have to accept that, that's probably not in the cards for me. But I can do stuff that a lot of those people doing muscle ups can't do. So why not focus on that?
It's like focus on your journey and stop trying to fit yourself into someone else's goal. I wanted to also touch onto the plantar fascia thing that I told you about the other day, because plantar fasciitis, there are so many people that are just like, sorry, you can't train at all. Sorry, shove your foot into this orthotic, but they're not giving the training for it. It's like, you need to actually, I am a firm believer of, if someone has an injury or if someone has something, you don't just cut out exercise completely. You need to return them to play and find out ways around it, instead of, cutting movement from their life. And, I'll let you ramble on about that because you go down a wormhole.
Sure. All right. Well, I'm going to put a big kind of broad disclaimer on this, right? When we're talking about any kind of a clinical issue, of course, and this varies, the limits to this will vary depending on what country you're in, how things are regulated, what scope of practice is and whatnot. But generally, just recognize if you're an exercise professional or whatever, you would want to coordinate, obviously, with the clinical team if somebody gets diagnosed with a thing. So nothing I'm saying is clinical advice. Okay. Nobody sue me, please. All right. Now, with that out of the way.
It's more pushing people to get a second opinion.
Yes. So what? Yes. So,
definitely get a second opinion.
So with that being said, plantar fasciitis is one example of many where somebody might be told, hey, exercise is just not for you, or all of these exercises should now be avoided. And generally what I have observed is that if a person is able to coordinate with whatever their clinical treatment is, which may have certain manual therapy interventions like massages or physical therapy or physiotherapy kind of thing, physio, depending on what country you're in, right? If maybe you had to have surgery, or maybe you had to have any of a million different interventions, you can still maybe have those. And that's a conversation for you to have with your care provider or your team of care providers. But if you, as a free adult who's making decisions in your life, want to continue being active, then you're going to have to face that conversation or face that topic of, okay, eventually I should transition into doing these things again, or I should modify in some way so that I can accommodate these habits in some way. I'll give you an example. I had a conversation with my primary care physician when I hurt my knee, when I first tore my ACL, and I didn't initially know that it was torn. And actually, I had the same conversation with him with a couple of other injuries prior to this. Now, fortunately, he's a sports medicine doctor. He's a family doctor, but also did a residency, or did a fellowship rather, in sports medicine. So he kind of overlaps well. And he's like, you're an athlete. I know you're not going to just want to not do anything. So let's have a conversation about what you can do. So my broad recommendation would be at least have a care team that is open to your continuing to be active, just broadly speaking. Okay. Because then you'll at least have a person who listens to you. And then from there, hopefully you can find a strategy that looks something like transitioning back to play, or back to working out, or back to whatever. If you have to stop, hopefully it's just a temporary stoppage. It's a pause. It's not, this is no longer for you. And we see so many examples of athletes, not that everybody's an athlete per se, but people at the highest levels elite martial arts, Olympic sports, you name it, who've had catastrophic injuries. Not just chronic pain. Oh, I have chronic patellar tendinosis, or I have plantar fasciitis, or I have whatever, but big, big things. And they still managed to come back. And I would wager that for those people, they did so by just working in a very careful way with their care team and paying close attention to how their body is adapting. Pain is one of these things that more and more we're finding can be modulated if people are working in concert with their bodies appropriately, and they form a proper relationship with their pain. They form a proper relationship with their bodies so that they respect the injury. So if you have an injury, if you have damage, if you have a physical problem, you don't act like it's not there. You acknowledge that it's there and work within the restraints that you may have with that. But you balance that with recognizing that it doesn't have to define you and it doesn't have to limit you completely.
I love that.
Yeah, and then I've tweaked my back a few times, right? And oh, okay, today I can't do this, and maybe I can't do this for a while, but it doesn't mean that I will never do this again. And that's that kind of conversation to have with yourself and with your care team over time. That's a really long-winded rant, but basically with something like plantar fasciitis, you can look into the research on it and you can talk to clinicians about it, and you're going to find a lot of clinicians, whether they're, they could even be surgeons who like to cut on people. They could be people who specialize in orthotics. They could be physiotherapists. You can find people who go, oh no, I've seen people recover from this. And then you find others who are very rigid about it, who act like it's the end of the world. And I think that's more of an old kind of, I don't want to just say outdated, because it's not just about being old, but it's not in keeping with what we seem to know about pain and about injuries. That perspective. Yeah, that perspective that like, oh, you're just broken now and you just can't do these things ever again. More often than not, it seems like that's not the case. More often than not, it seems like if we're smart about it, we can bounce back from a lot of things. There are too many examples out there of people who've torn muscles clean off the bone, or who've shattered a limb, or who've just been in a catastrophic car accident, or they've had, just massive trauma to their bodies, or just long-term debilitating pain that lasted for like years, but then they still eventually resolved it and managed to go on and do amazing things. So it's hard for me to think that I will be convinced of that people have to, I'm not wording that well. It's hard for me to believe that most of the time you can't get back to some kind of physical activity using that area that's been damaged or that's experiencing pain or what have you, if you're smart about it.
It's coming back to the whole theme of pretty much this whole podcast, and that's everything is individual and contextual to you. It's what you're able to do. And if someone says you can't do something and they're not open to listen and to work you back into play, or if they act with so much confidence without nuance and without actually questioning you, then I would say get a second opinion and listen to your body a little bit more as well. Listen to your body a little bit more. Yeah,
and again, let me say, I mean, there's a difference too between, like you can have two doctors who both say, oh, you have this problem and you really need to avoid this exercise. And one is saying it after having listened to you and having had a conversation with you, and really like the two of you hashed it out and get, okay, there's still a lot of risk here. I get you, and I get that you want to get back to that, and maybe we'll try, and there's like an open-mindedness to it versus the person who like from square one just straight up said, oh no, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
There's a difference between those two conversations. One is not really even a conversation, it's just them telling you something. And the other is there being a working relationship and a dialogue. And you need to have that, just as you need to have some sort of a dialogue with your own body. Have an understanding, form a relationship with your own body and your own sensation and all of these things that you're getting feedback on. It comes back to just having that conversation, have that relationship. And so many things can be worked out if the communication stays clear and consistent. And that kind of as a theme feeds back into what we were talking about at the beginning about how there are so many miscommunications and so many shouting matches in this field because people don't bother trying to actually have an understanding and have a good, proper conversation about a lot of these things.
If you were to summarize pretty much this whole talk with one sentence, even though there's no context unless they listen to the actual video like we spoke about, but like that one sentence that leads you to death or to the kitchen, what would it be?
Oh man. I guess I can kind of piggyback off what I just said. You're really putting me on the spot.
Even rewinding back to the whole debate on it's either context A or context B. It's either this or that.
So many things are made better if you have an understanding of yourself, of others, of what you want and what you mean.
I love that.
Yeah. And that kind of fits, I think, at least a little with everything we've talked about.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. I'm going to actually, okay, so Jeff actually posts I'm just going to say the most musings on his fitness musing Facebook. So I'm actually going to link that into this podcast so you can go and visit it. And you'll see exactly what I'm talking about, how he actually makes you question the questions. And that's exactly what I'm all about. Question the questions, because not every question has the same answer. Like questions should have questions to lead to more questions to then figure out your path, not your answer, but your path. And your path has many answers along the way. So
thank you for that. Yeah. And and for anybody who checks out my page, I put a lot of stuff on there that may come across at first as just being kind of like complaining or snarky, but it's often done with my tongue firmly in cheek, and it's meant hopefully to get people to like pause and think even unconsciously about just some of the weird, wacky, silly things that we do or say or believe, and get us to go, oh, maybe I'll think a little more deeply about this. Even my thing about kettlebells and propping open the door that I posted yesterday.
Oh my God, that was freaking hilarious. Okay, so if you're thinking about getting kettlebells for your gym, right, make sure it's an odd number. So one of them can keep open the door. Oh, but if you have 2 doors, you might want to get even numbers just so you keep open both doors. You know, it's logic.
Yeah, this is a pro tip and followed up by a super pro tip. So yeah, if you like those pro tips, just hit me up for consultation. I'm available. I'll tell you my rates later.
He'll probably tell you to get the pink kettlebell while you're at it too, just for fanciness.
Well, it's better for the feng shui, you know, it just helps the whole aesthetic of the room.
Oh, great.
All about it.
Thank you for coming on.
Oh, thanks, Ruby.